Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 1, Episode 13. It's called The Storyteller. So full spoilers for the episode as always. And this episode has two plots, and I hesitate to say an A plot and a B plot, because honestly they're pretty even, I would say. I'm not sure which one you would call the A plot, to be honest.
If I had to choose, I would probably go with the O'Brien one. I may be biased though, just because that's the title of the episode may be influencing that.
Here's the thing, I would have went the other way, except for the fact that it kind of glosses over the resolution to what I would have called the A plot, and as soon as they did that, I went, oh, was that the B plot the whole time? And I just thought it was the A plot.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, obviously we'll talk about the ins and outs, but yes, the premise of this one is that O'Brien and Bashir, much to O'Brien's dismay, go down to Bajur to help with a medical emergency in a small village. So that's one plot. The other plot is that there's two, I'll call them tribes for lack of a better word. I don't know if that's a word they ever used in the episode, but two tribes of Bajurans who are having a dispute over land that are coming up to the station for Cisco to help mediate negotiations on. And they're surprised that one of the tribe leaders is actually a teenage girl who ends up kind of befriending Jake and Nog. So that is our two plots. I was kind of waiting for them to thematically feel like they tied to each other by the end of the episode, and I don't think they ever really did. At one point in O'Brien's plot, they did mention that this village used to be two factions who hated each other, and I thought, oh, maybe
this is where we're going. Yeah.
And then it just never really felt like it mattered that much in the other plot. It never came up in any way.
No.
So
I guess if you really, really want to stretch it, you could maybe go with something about, this being the first step towards, in the same way that we have like a united Earth, right? In Star Trek, as opposed to.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are you talking about? In Star Trek, yes. Yes,
in Star Trek. Context is important, I admit, but we are talking about Star Trek here, so I wonder if it's trying to imply something like, if you can do it on that village, and they're reasonably into that, that journey, whereas these two other tribes are like just at the very start. Maybe it's. They're all on that same trajectory. But
I mean, if anything else,
I am stretching.
If anything, I'll say it is kind of interesting to deal with two groups of Bajorans and their problems in the same episode, and it kind of establishes, Bajor is a pretty diverse place. There's a lot of different groups. There's a lot of different things going on, and now that the Cardassians aren't there, to be this shared enemy, which is one of the conceits of the O'Brien plot, is that these two halves of this village are united because of a shared threat. Although it sounds like this shared threat's been going on for such a long time that it must have been happening while the Cardassians were there. So I'm like, were they just hidden from the Cardassians because they were on this little offshoot somewhere? They just never get, invaded like everyone else did.
I mean, this threat's only once a year, right? Like, they could have had this while the Cardassians were there as well.
I suppose. I'm just saying, you think they'd have moved on and realized, you know what, this occupation by the Cardassians is making it really easy for us all to have a common enemy. Maybe.
I think you have to remember you're overlooking the fact that most of the village don't realize that it's not like a real thing. It's only the spiritual leader who knows that it's kind of all fake.
So to get into this plot, just so we can actually start talking about it and explain what's going on here, there's an old man who's dying. I'm going to call him Gandalf. And he is like a wizard who goes out and yells at a cloud that comes in the sky. 5 nights in a row, once a year, this evil cloud comes and tries to destroy the village. And there's a couple of blasts that blow up some rocks. And he basically inspires the entire village to all feel positive feelings and be united as one.
Friendship.
Yeah, to send it back to wherever it came. And it works. But he's dying, right? His organs are failing. Bashir basically says there's nothing we can do for him. He's it's a lost cause. Make him comfortable, make his time remaining, and he probably speeds it up because he insists on going out and doing his speech again. He literally has seemingly a heart attack or something while he's yelling in front of the crowd.
Old man yells at cloud.
But he's got a staff, he's got a robe, and I was like, so honestly, this turning out to be a man behind the curtain thing where this thing isn't really real isn't a surprise. And to be fair, it's not even really a surprise to Bashir and O'Brien, because immediately their first thought is that a hologram? No, it's not a hologram, but there's still something fishy about it. Look, this is...
Yeah, and it's weird because it is real. Like, it can cause damage. It can hurt people. It does hurt people. It's just kind of a shared figment of everyone's imagination that they conjure up with a magic rock.
Yeah, they mention a MacGuffin, like an energy source that Bashir mentions.
It's the same thing from that Sisko was with in the first episode.
Yeah, that sounds right. I can't remember what it's called though, which is why I'm just saying MacGuffin. But you know, that's where it comes from, and basically the first one of these Sarah, and I remember that because every time they said it in my head I went, Sarah, Sarah, whatever will be, will be. Like every time they said it.
I'm glad it wasn't just me.
So he dies, but he's basically chosen for some reason. He like thinks O'Brien's his successor. He's like, O'Brien, you must be the new Sarah. You must guide these people. And O'Brien's like, what? I don't want this. Go away.
And they're all like, yeah, it's cool. Bring your wife down. Bring the kid. Live here.
They try and offer him women for sex, and he's like, I'm a married man. Let's not do this. Yeah, there's a whole thing. And basically, there's a young guy who's supposed to be the next in line, but he failed to actually do it a few nights ago, which is why everyone's panicking and thinks they need this guy to live. And then they all flock to O'Brien because they think O'Brien's the one that'll do it. But it was really still the old man who was just kind of like feeding them the lines. So, but it's all linked up to like their shared like sense of unity, and they have to be inspired to focus their feelings, and that's what drives it away. It's been set up that way, so that's why that works. It's not some magical thing. It's just this has literally been designed to be triggered by this feeling. Yep. So, okay, fine. And ultimately, O'Brien doesn't want to do it. The young guy ends up taking over during the fifth night, and they all accept him as their new Sarai. I think the problem with this plot is that it's a fun enough idea that this village has got this kind of fake boogeyman, and the idea that it's the shared enemy, that ties into a lot of fiction. Watchmen's the first thing that comes to mind. That's the villain's whole plan in that, is that to unite everyone over a shared common enemy.
Yep.
I think the problem is that for our main characters, the only thing I really liked about it is that we start the episode with O'Brien trying to get out of this job because he doesn't want to spend like 3 hours in a runabout with Bashir, because he doesn't really like him very much.
And you blame him.
And Bashir, there's a great moment actually on their way down where they're both in shot, and like O'Brien's not looking at him, he's just sort of doing his doohickeys up at the front, and Bashir just keeps asking him things like, do I annoy you, Chief O'Brien? He's like, why'd you ask that, sir? Just like, and watching O'Brien's face as he kept asking more questions was quite entertaining.
I fully get it, because obviously we like Bashir well enough as a character, is entertaining to watch. I know people like him, and I hate them. I do not want to deal with you. Yeah,
not everyone you enjoy as a character is someone you'd enjoy to actually be around in real life.
While I do like Bashir, I want to make that clear. I like him. I enjoy him as a character on this show. I fully understand O'Brien in this. I'm right there with him.
I think that's partly why this is so entertaining, though, is because you do like both, but you completely understand why one is really annoyed by the other. So he's like, call me Jillian. I learned his first name, Jillian, this episode because it's the first time. He's probably mentioned it before, but this is the first. It's been
mentioned a few times. Yeah.
But he really is. But every time O'Brien says it, it's like he's saying "f you" instead.
Yeah. He's like, okay, Julian, like clenched jaw.
And by the end when they're coming back, like they're not best of friends, and it's probably the biggest positive that I want to kind of give this plot. Is that it didn't wrap it up by the end where, oh, you know what, we really like each other by the end. I actually kind of like that, okay, there's a bit of camaraderie formed, but at the end, Bashir's, you know what, don't call me Jillian, because, it doesn't sound that good coming from you. And O'Brien's kind of one, but I like that it's like, oh, this isn't done. Like, we can play with this kind of, O'Brien doesn't really like him that much, but there's maybe a growing sense of camaraderie, despite the fact that personally they don't like, they can keep, this can be like a running thing now, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, like I say, it's not a damning thing in the end. It's not like Bashir giving in. It's more like do you know what? Okay, I've grown to respect you just enough that I'll let you kind of call me what makes you comfortable as opposed to what makes me comfortable.
Yeah, it's something where if they actually do become more genuine friends, and over a couple of seasons, it'll feel a bit more meaningful now because it's not just a quick, end of TV episode fix that it's like, oh, now we respect each other and we're friends. It's like, okay, there's some mutual respect forming. We've been through a situation together. I mean, Bashir literally saves him from being stabbed at one point.
Yeah.
Which is all fine, but it means we can actually kind of keep playing with this. The rest of this plot is mildly amusing. There was a couple of times
Fine.
I had to rewind like a minute a couple of times because I realized I zoned out and didn't listen to a single word that was being said. So I had to go back and re-listen to a scene. That happened to me like 2 or 3 times in this episode.
Yeah, that's never a good sign.
No. And because we're going to review it, I actually felt the need that, okay, I have to go back and understand what the hell they were saying. But if I wasn't watching this for review, I just like, it's fine.
Sure. Side tangent.
Yeah.
I saw like a thread on Twitter this week related to Star Trek specifically. So it's still related, but it was talking about how like the original series was like incredibly popular with like housewives, more so than expected. Yeah, as it was airing, and
it's that Kirk. They all love that sexy Kirk. That's what.
That was what some people suggested, and then it came up with a significantly better, well, not better, but more likely explanation. And it talked about how most people when they watch, it's like people complain about people watch when they're watching TV now, they're just like on their phones and the TV's on in the background. That's kind of been the way with TV always. It's kind of just been there. But the thing with like original series is it's really telegraphed when you have to pay attention. Like there's a music or a sound sting where you need to look up now, as opposed to just listen to the characters talking. And I was like that, and I'm like, do you know what? Because I'd seen it this week, kind of in my head, I was watching this. I'm like, it's onto something. Because I think Deep Space Nine and Next Gen do this as well, where it is very much like, it's talking. You can kind of just not pay attention, but you don't have to be giving it 100% staring at the screen, the entire time. It can be on you taking in the dialogue, and then the show tells you when to look and pay attention. I think that's actually. It's an impressive skill that I've never noticed before, and now I'm fascinated by.
Yeah, I think for casual viewing, which we're never going to be just casually viewing it, because we're nerds. We want to actually pay attention to the details, and I think if you're really into it, you should pay attention to the details. But but if you're in this case, we're talking about housewives in the 60s. If you're doing your like laundry or something, you've got it on.
Ideas like they could be cleaning with it on in the room, hear all the dialogue, and still be listening to that, obviously, and taking that all in. And then, action's happening. I'll stop and look now because it tells me that I need to look.
Well, it's something that's actually went away over time because TV has decided to be more cinematic and the visuals are just as important. But there was a time when TV was often mocked as radio with faces, where you could just listen to it, 90% of it, and not miss anything because it's all just in the dialogue anyway. That obviously starts to change over time. And nowadays, like, you can't even, like, I try to watch Better Call Saul without looking at the script. Like, you'd get...
Yeah, no, you'd miss so much.
You'd miss the majority of it, probably. So much of it's
Imagine
visual
watching
storytelling.
Something like one of the Mike doing his job.
I know.
Like, time lapses. There's 5 minutes of just some background music.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's just how different ways TV was made. And I don't know if that was by design specifically for the idea that people might not be paying attention when they're watching TV as much as they should, or if it was more about like waking the audience up and making them like, okay, right, seriously, that was the important part, like get into it. Like I don't know what the philosophy was.
Like, I never really thought about it, but now once it was pointed out to me and I watched this with that, I'm like, okay, it's really blatant and like you won't miss it now.
Yeah. I wonder how intentional that was. I wonder if it's just a natural marrying up of like the moments that have the drama with the music. It just sort of coincides with, that's when things are getting more visual, because obviously you can have music on while people are talking, but typically you don't. Typically you'll just have, the dialogue, right?
Yeah.
So it may just be like a happy happenstance between them. And for older TV shows that aren't as visually, like, consistently doing something interesting, it kind of works for them. But that's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's a side little thing for me before we get to the other plot, which obviously we're going to talk about. I must, just make a statement. This is the first episode we've done on Deep Space Nine since this has become relevant. I must confess that I now know a few things about the future of Deep Space Nine. Not by choice.
I would like to say, thanks to Twitter, so do I.
Oh, that's a shame.
Because
I wasn't going to tell you.
No, I know. I happened to see you. Not you. Obviously, you didn't say anything.
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
mentioned on Twitter that you'd kind of seen some stuff. Or like you knew some stuff now because of. I'm assuming it was in Picard.
Yeah, Picard.
'Cause obviously, that's the show that's on right now. But
it's also the only one that's like set after this time period that could possibly reference
that's
that.
true. Yeah, but Twitter's a hellhole, and people do not mark things as spoilers in any way whatsoever. So yeah, I saw stuff. Yeah, thanks to her.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this, right? Because I don't know how much you saw in this, like compared to what I've seen, so I still won't bring it up, right? And especially since people might be watching this show for the first time with us, I don't want to spoil it for the audience either.
We'll talk about it off air. Don't worry.
Yeah. But what I will say is that everything that it revealed, because it wasn't a lot of details. There's not like a lot of details spoiled for me, but just some broad strokes. I will say everything that it sort of said, hey, this is the kind of thing that's going to go on in Deep Space Nine. All of it's stuff that I think we actively kind of were hoping in some fashion it would be down that path. So,
yes.
Okay. The positive side is I'm excited for the rest of the show. I wish I didn't know anything, but
yeah, but at the same time,
that's what it is.
It's a minor miracle we went 20 odd years knowing nothing. So
the irony is that Picard actually is getting kind of good this season, but this is when it's dropping stuff that I wish it wasn't dropping.
Yeah.
So,
oh well, I mean,
it is what it is.
Like I say, it's a 20-odd-year-old show. We can't complain too much about knowing spoilers.
Hell, it's almost 30 years old. I mean, we're almost at 30 years since the premiere of it.
Oh shit, you're right.
94, no, 93, 94. We're done. So
I hate time. Thanks for reminding me. I'm almost 30. I know you're past it and you're old, but I don't have to think about that. And then people at work were like, "You're 30 next year." I'm like, "Oh, screw you."
Oh yeah, I'm old because I'm 33. You prick.
Yeah, you're ancient. It's like, I'm not even 29 yet, and people are telling me you're 30 next year. How does it feel to be ancient? I'm like, it doesn't help that like half the people I work around are like 16 to 18.
Yeah, they're all just out of school or even still in school.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny. So I wanted to acknowledge it on the show and just say that I do know a couple things. I am excited about like the broad strokes that I heard. I'm not using any of the words. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who is keeping spoiler free and watching these reviews for the first time alongside the show. I won't say any of it, but I am excited for it. The stuff that it was hinted at. So
me too, from what I saw. Yeah.
So hopefully it doesn't spoil it any more for me than it already has. I can't really blame it if it does, because ultimately it should have access to that history. But
like I say, it's a show set after that. There'll be people who complain if it doesn't reference things.
Yeah. Nah, it is what it is. But we got through like 2.5 seasons almost. We're only it was like 6 episodes to the end, and then it was shit. They're talking about Deep Space Nine stuff. Like they couldn't have just not done it, the bastards. But hey. That's what it is. So,
never mind. Should we talk about the other plot now?
Yeah. The other plot, which I think on paper was a little better.
Yeah, I didn't hate it. Like, I think it's got a little bit more intricacy to it.
Yeah. So the basic gist of this is that there's this dispute between these two factions, these two tribes, whatever name we're calling the groups of Bajorans. And the basic problem is that they've always kind of been against each other, but there was a treaty long ago which said that their land, which is next to each other, was the bounds of their land was the river, right? This is where it crosses over from one tribe into the other. This is where your land ends and theirs begins. Simple enough. But those Cardassians, the scoundrels that they are, but for reasons that I'm sure that there was like a one line that explained it, but they diverted the river when they were there. So now the river is like moved in one direction much further than it was before, and
so someone gained a lot more land.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, the tribe led by the now teenage girl is got more land, and the other's like, we want our land back because it was, we've lost so much in this. And she's like, no. And she does kind of explain that she's worried that if she gives in that she'll look weak, and that people already think she's weak because she's a teenager, and her father was this great leader, but the Cardassians killed her parents, all the rest of it.
So she's kind of still relatively fresh at the job, and like this is the first major challenge of outside power, and she kind of wants to prove herself.
Yeah, Sisko's trying to talk to her, and it's actually talking to Jake and Nog, and because Jake speaks so highly of his dad, that she kind of ultimately learns to sort of like talk to him a bit more openly, because at first she's really standoffish with him as well, but later on in the episode she's like, look, Jake speaks very highly of you, he trusts you, so I want to trust you, let's talk about this. But what my favorite part of all this though, right, apart from just kind of the amusement of Nog really fancying her and getting really nervous every time he's around her, and Jake, he's not even that suave, but he comes off looking like the most suavest guy because Nog is acting so like nervous.
I mean, when they knock on her door, which I think he makes Jake do, well, yeah, they're going to, I think she just comes out.
Yes.
He's like, I think he introduced himself first as Jog, and then he says he's Jake. Yes. And then Jake's like, no. I'm Jake. That's Nog.
Admittedly, yes. The line for suave here is being able to say your own name successfully.
And someone else's name. Let's be fair.
Yes. So Jake comes off looking like a stud next to Nog. But my favorite thing about all this is that one, she actually opens up a little bit to them about the problems she's facing. She doesn't go into the details too much, but he's like, oh, this other tribe really wants this thing from us, and we can't really give it up. And immediately, like, Nog's been too nervous to say anything all episode, but she stumbled into Ferengi territory here, because is a transaction. And what do Ferengi know? They know transactions.
And he's like, let's get schemy with it.
His first question is like, well, is there anything that they have that you want? And she's like, maybe. It's like, aha, so it could be mutually beneficial. I was like, this is actually really, I don't want to say smart, but this is kind of witty, that they're using this idea that there's a solution to her problem that lends itself to the Ferengi way of thinking, and just by suggesting a transaction that's like fair for both sides, Nog somehow actually stumbles into giving her the best advice out of anyone.
And it's nice to see this, because it is like still following that Ferengi mindset of like, oh, what can we get? Mm-hmm. Right, so but it doesn't come across as it usually does with being just greedy and selfish. It's a little bit of an interesting subversion on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's still a little self-interest because he's trying to impress her. He's trying to help her because he likes her. But you can there's a blurry line there as to what point is that sweet and what point is that him being for his own sake.
Well, that's the. I mean, you could do that with like pretty much any good deed anyone ever does.
Yeah.
Right, it's that old argument.
Yeah. Obviously, he's got a lot of growing up to do. It's still, I mean, it's very Ferengi, but at one point he turns to Jay and says, I saw her first, she's mine. Like, he's really, which is also a very juvenile thing to say.
It's even when they first see her, like, because they're sat up on the promenade and Odo's like, piss off, basically.
Yeah, he doesn't like them loitering, especially hanging their feet off the edge of the walkway.
Yeah, it's so dangerous. But he's like, she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and Jake's like, she's fine.
Again, he's suave. He's the suave one.
Yeah, he's playing it cool.
Yeah, but no, she recognizes that Nog's really into her, and she gives him a kiss on the cheek before she leaves. I did really like this moment at the end, just purely because of the camera work. It did this thing where it ended that conversation where she's leaving with Sisko, and Odo pops in and gives him out of trouble and says, you're cleaning the security room. We'll talk about why in a minute, but he says, you're cleaning the security room. And the camera follows them to the security room, then it just keeps going to the entrance and the other part of the promenade, and then walk Bashir and O'Brien, and they wrap up their last little bit of conversation. And I thought, that was a really nice bringing together of all the plots in one shot. I like that.
I'll say it's the most link those two plots get all episode.
It really is. It is the most connection they ever have, is that camera shot. But it was a nice way of like, this was a day in the life. The only thing that really connected everything was that it was all dealing with Bajoran problems. That was really the only proper link. I will say, what's interesting is because they're stationed permanently above Bajor, it is kind of interesting that I'll think like the Storyteller group will be back, but it's interesting that this girl could maybe pop up later because they're still here Like, they might never do, but she could.
Yeah, and like in theory, they could go and visit her.
Is it
It's definitely a possibility.
like anything they introduced that's on Bezier could become a recurring thing? Most of them probably won't, but one or two might because they're there. Why couldn't they be?
It's just one other thing that like separates this from, other Trek shows that we've had. They're always traveling. There's often recurring elements. Even just the big things like Klingons, for example, originally, or Vulcans, things like that. When we're dealing with other species, that was a recurring theme. But this here, it's so specific, right? And to have that home base that when we can build a support, not just a supporting cast on the ship, but like a wider community that we can kind of outreach to, does make it feel very different.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where obviously other Trek shows get to just go from planet to planet and discover all these new things. It is kind of interesting that we can have a planet like Bezier where it can be as diverse as Earth in terms of all its different areas and problems, because we've got 7 seasons potentially to encounter new groups down there and new places down there. And normally you don't do that in sci-fi because you go into a new planet. It's the Star Wars problem of like, you've got the ice planet, you got the fire planet. We could see all the climates that are on Bezier because we're here for the whole show.
And but also, we can have recurring elements from there. Like, I mean, we've already seen it with the I think was it this last episode with the spiritual leader?
Yeah, the Kai, yeah.
Yeah, obviously she was there in episode 1, and then she'd come back, halfway through the season. Obviously, that's just one example, but I'm sure there'll be others.
Yeah, so I do appreciate that. All that said, though, this episode's not that great. Like, there's little things to like. Probably more in the station plot than the. I mean, I like O'Brien and Bashir bouncing off each other. I like the personality stuff.
Those two are enjoyable. That has a stronger point to what it's actually doing, because by the end of it, you get what it's saying. But I think the station plot's still a little bit more entertaining to watch.
Yeah, because what I mentioned earlier is that it kind of glosses over the conclusion. You never actually see the meeting where they agree upon something. You just see Sisko walking her out and saying, "Oh yes, agreeing to give them the land back for free trade across the river both ways was a good compromise." And it's like, oh, okay, so we just glossed over that and heard about it afterwards, which made it feel more like the B plot in the end.
Yeah, and you do have like the scene like Nog pulling the prank on them.
Oh yeah, that's the other big thing we should talk about, is that to try and impress this girl when she's feeling a little sad about how hard this decision is that she's making, his plan is to try and steal Odo's bucket. Which, to be fair, they set up that Odo's giving them some grief, so that's why he's got maybe a little vendetta against Odo right now.
And they're like, we're going to return it. It's not a big deal. They're not like, stealing anything crazy. It's not anything like security-wise. They're not like going after key cards or anything like that.
Yeah, but he might, like, maybe Odo takes his, like, his bucket to Odo might be what, like, I don't know, something sacred.
I think it's about as private as it gets. It's like it's his bed, it's his home, essentially, right? It's the closest thing he has.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's not important to Odo. I'm saying it's relatively harmless from their point of view.
It all goes a bit tits up though, because Nog decides to play a prank where he throws the bucket sort of in Jake's direction and he gets covered in gunk, and he thinks he's covered in Odo. And obviously,
like, Odo, please get up.
Which immediately looks nothing like the effect we've seen before with Odo. So you're like, oh, this isn't right. And he's like, yeah, it's oatmeal. I got it out of the replicator. Yeah. And they all start laughing, but then Odo shows up and spoils the party. And then Sisko shows up like 2 seconds later as well. So, yeah.
It's quite funny though. I was actually like, as far as like quick pranks go, it's not bad.
I love the idea that, Sisko is like proud of his son. His son's becoming this considerate young man who's helping his friend to read, and
the girl was like, Joe, it was his opinion that meant a lot. He spoke so highly.
Yeah,
he's like, that's nice to hear.
And he walks out, and I'm here, and he's just standing there with porridge all down his front.
Yeah. Fun times.
Give me a chuckle. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, this one's quite lowly rated in IMDb, and I'm not surprised why, having watched it. It doesn't really come together, the two plots. There's not like anything super special about it. There's a couple of neat little character moments. That's kind of
I don't think it's a terrible episode. I don't think it's unwatchable or anything. It's like, oh, that was really bad.
Oh, there's
it's just not that good.
We've seen worse from Trek by far. Yeah,
lots worse.
No doubt. But hey, still those season 1 growing pains. That's okay. You gotta get those out.
I mean, that's the thing though. Even if you get an episode like this every so often in like season 4, that's not that bad. Yeah, when you've got 20 odd episodes.
If anything, it could be like a breather if like a lot of the episodes are quite intense and a lot of serialized. Because I understand this show is a lot more serialized than Next Gen is, so it could be that when we get deep into the story, there may be a lot more intense in a good way. But you may appreciate a little breather episode
like
once in a while.
Even like Next Gen has had those kind of moments for us. Like I'm thinking things like the Mama Troy episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of come out, in the middle of like often in the middle of like, okay, we got a few heavy hitters, some serious episodes, less serialized, but still like intense episodes. And those are just these kind of fun little breathers. And I don't think this is as good as most of those episodes. Don't get me wrong, but it's the same style of like, we can just take a breather.
Yeah. So next time we will be back to Next Generation. But when we do come back to Deep Space Nine, we'll be looking at an episode called Progress. And this is the description on IMDb. Kira must convince an old Bajoran farmer to leave a moon becoming uninhabitable due to mining operations. Jake and Nog try to trade off Cardassian yamok sauce.
Okay, so the first part is basically, hey, we want to renovate this building. How much do we have to buy you out with?
Yeah, kind of. It sounds like
but on a moon.
Yeah, the old man's probably in danger because he's not moving, and they want to. Yeah. Whereas the other plot sounds like Nog's actually going to try and get into actual trading. He's going to try and actually sell something to people.
Yes, some Ferengi business.
Yeah, Cardassian yamok sauce.
Interesting that we've got Jake and Nog plot 2 episodes in a row.
Yeah. Don't know, maybe. Yeah, I mean, maybe it was a conscious effort to try and like have a plot always for the kid characters, because maybe get a younger audience watching as well.
We haven't seen them that much recently. I wonder if part of it is, hey, we can block them for a few weeks during school holidays because they're the kid actors. Let's shoot these episodes now, and we'll and because we're shooting them relatively in sequence because they do it episode by episode.
It's not ridiculous, I suppose. Maybe it's just that there's other episodes coming up, so it's just like if we don't do it now, they're going to be not getting their fair share.
Also possible,
yeah, for the rest of the season. I don't know. But interesting. So we'll see how Progress turns out next time. But let us know what you thought of this episode of Deep Space Nine in the comments. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates, and of course you can support all the content by going to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and supporting us over there and help keep all the reviews coming. But yeah, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek. And what if the cloud is like the ancestor or the descendant, depending on which way evolution goes, of Odo? Because liquid, gas.
This is your worst one yet.
And in the middle, obviously, there's a solid, which is, I guess that's just everyone else.